Good morning. Today at the Intelligence Forum's Who Are You podcast, we're very privileged to have Alina Kessel. Alina has been a director of DS Smith. She's a trustee of Glyndebourne Productions and has much more of that besides. Welcome, Alina.
Thank you very much, Harry. Nice to be here.
I'm already talking over the top of you, which is not a good start, but forgive me for that. I will restrain myself. So what I would start by saying is, could you let us know about your professional journey up to now?
Sure. Thank you. So, look, I've been in advertising, marketing, brand building for my entire career, which has been quite long, several decades. I started at an advertising agency in New York City. I then moved to Düsseldorf because I happened to marry a Dutch guy who was living in Germany. More to that story if you ever want to hear. And then spent many years there. And then we moved to London, then back to Germany to Berlin, and then back to London again. So quite a few sort of international moves. I also worked for a year in Australia after university, which was unforgettable. But that's sort of been what I've been doing. I've always liked doing something different, getting myself into a meaty challenge. So I was a CEO of two advertising agencies in Germany as the only woman and non-German, which was quite a big sort of a thing to manage, but I enjoyed it. I was one of the first big global client leaders at WPP for our multinational clients like Procter & Gamble, for instance. I led several transformations, such as merging a creative agency with a digital one and running the combined group as CEO, or moving one of our multi-million-dollar clients from using 90 plus different agencies to an integrated group of 5. So I've done sort of really interesting things. I've been very fortunate to have a varied, exciting career.
I think you probably created your own luck, Alina. You're being modest. So what I'd also ask you is, in all the countries you've worked, so let's say Germany, Australia, USA, UK, do you have a feeling that in each of those countries they have an advantage in business terms? And if you feel that, what would they be?
Yeah, I do. I mean, look, there are obviously lots of similarities, and perhaps some of the things that I'll mention are cliches, I suppose. But from my own personal experience, I can tell you the differences. So in Germany, I think the difference there is that Germany has really great educated, trained talent. I do think that that's true. They spend a lot of time and effort bringing their people up, also in the business world. I also think in Germany, there are a lot of independent, privately owned, often family owned businesses. And that means that they can invest in the long term. They have long term strategies. They take the time. They don't need to turn quarterly profits necessarily. So that makes a big difference as well. There's a lot of loyalty in Germany. I mean, all of these things also have the flip side, right? Also bring with them their challenges. But I think that's a difference in Germany. US, well, access to capital, sheer scale, might. But I think the other big difference in the US is that there's a culture of promoting, celebrating success and winning and wealth. And that's seen as a good thing. This idea of the American dream is a thing. And so, that's to be admired. For somebody to be wealthy or successful or a winner is admired. And that's not the case, I think, in Europe and in the UK, where, you shouldn't be sticking your head above the parapet unless you want it to be chopped off. So, it's almost bad manners here to be successful and wealthy, openly successful and wealthy. So I think that's a difference in the US. And of course, lots of big businesses clearly come out of there. UK, I've run a global business for many, many years from here, and it is the most convenient, if nothing else, place to run a global business out of, just given its location. Proximity to Europe, relative proximity to the US and Asia, if you will, sitting, if you run global calls, I always felt sorry for my colleagues because we could do it at the comfortable hour, lunchtime hour, whereas in the US it would be early in the morning, and the West Coast very early in the morning, and in Asia sometimes middle of the night. So that and the travel distances make it very easy to, and the language obviously make it very easy to run global businesses out of here. And also there's great talent, very creative talent. I think the creative industry in the UK is really enviable, and that's fantastic. And then Australia, gosh, it's been a long time since I lived in Australia, but I think maybe that's wrong, but I think it's relative isolation, being away from the madness of the rest of the world, I think is actually an advantage. They're a bit more in charge of their own destiny. They have a bit of that freedom, I think, that perhaps is not the case in the rest of the world. I also think just the lifestyle there, no wonder so many people want to move to Australia, and also from here. The lifestyle is amazing. And I'll never forget when I was there, just as a little anecdote. Obviously, things have changed in the many, many years since I've been there. But I worked for a concrete company, of all things. And we finished work at 4 o'clock every day to be able to get to the beach. My colleague, boss, happened to have his own little airplane. He married well, and we'd go off on 3-hour lunches, fly off somewhere to meet clients. So, it was a magical time. Obviously, those things are not the norm anymore, but in general, I think the lifestyle in Australia, the healthy sort of living is also a positive for the people who work, and therefore for the business. So that would be my little sort of trot across the globe.
Well, we're certainly moving around the world. And while we're on that subject, so equality for women in business, something you'll have a view on, and a well-informed one. How do you feel we're doing in the UK? Or is it work in progress, or are we there?
Well, definitely not there. Definitely work in progress in some instances, lack thereof. But there's a lot to do. There's been a lot of focus on it. Clearly, there's been some movements when it comes to boards, for example. But there is much more to do. I've been fortunate personally that I haven't felt that to be in any way a detriment to my own sort of career, but we're not there yet. I was thinking, I read this book recently and met the author of it, called The Authority Gap. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
It's by Marianne Sieghart. She is clearly an authority on this subject. And I love the title of it, The Authority Gap, because she argues that there's a gap between women being taken as seriously as men. And that's essentially the mother of all gaps, because it leads to inequality when it comes to the workplace, the gender pay gap, et cetera, et cetera. And she has so much data in this book that if you read it, you can be under no illusion that we're moving forward at the pace that we should be moving forward. She has 30 pages of bibliography to support her data, so it's a really well researched, well argued position. So yes, still a ways to go.
Still a way to go. Well, thank you very much for that. And in your experience of being a trustee of, are you still a trustee for Fight for Sight?
I am, yes, Fight for Sight and Glyndebourne, yeah.
And Glyndebourne, and having been a director of a major FTSE
Yeah.
100. What makes for a good board in your view?
Yeah, and actually, the DS Smith, I was a NED at DS Smith up until a couple of weeks ago when we got acquired by International Paper, which was a massive
Yeah.
multi-billion-dollar acquisition, very good for the shareholders. So the board did its job. Um, I think teamwork, as sort of basic as that sounds, teamwork within the board and between the board and the exec is really critical. That means that everybody has to know their roles. The role of a non-exec is to constructively challenge and support the exec, to help them with the strategy, to bring their expertise, but it's not to run the business. Obviously, it's not to micromanage. And I think knowing the roles and working as a team makes for a good board. I think it's absolutely essential to have a great relationship between the chair and the CEO. If there is respect and trust between the chair and the CEO, the board will work well. And if there isn't, it just won't. I think that's major. And I think diversity, and by that I don't just mean gender and ethnic diversity, which are important, but background, expertise, experience. At Fight for Sight, for instance, the sight loss charity I'm a trustee of, we have, in the meantime, and it took us a while to get there, several people on the board and in the exec who are vision impaired. That makes a huge difference. So lived experience, I think, is helpful as well. And then, being quite deliberate about the skills matrix for the board. What is it? What kind of expertise do you want to have around that table? And I sort of think about it as your usual T-shaped. The board member should be a T-shaped person. So work across all of the different elements, be able to contribute to strategy, but also have a narrow subject matter expertise and have different subject matter expertise around the table of that board so that you can sort of cover all different areas. I think those help.
I must apologize. We're moving around topics fast and furiously, putting you on the hot seat. But innovation and creativity, words that you will understand very well. How important are they to you? And how important are they, in your view, in business?
Very is what I would say. So incredibly important to me. That's been what's been driving me more or less my entire life and career, not only in the day job of being in advertising and brand building, but also on the boards with Glyndebourne, for example, a wonderful creative institution, an iconic brand. And just personally, I've always loved that. I think there's a great quote by a famous ad man, Bill Bernbach, and he said, "Creativity is the most powerful force in business." And I truly believe that. And I've always believed that. And you can see it at work. And I think today, especially today, creativity is more needed than ever with everything that's going on. There's so much, be it technological advancements or consumer needs changing, or global competition being much more difficult to navigate, as well as local competition with companies, springing up in all different places. The sustainability imperative has taken a bit of a backseat these days, given all sorts of priorities, but is obviously very, very important for companies and for people. And geopolitics, a very insecure, very uncertain, very volatile world, all of those things, and then put together because they're happening simultaneously. You can't solve for it if you're not creative, if you're not innovative. I think that it's a must. And so I would say that the world these days needs creativity and innovation more than ever. And maybe one other thing that I would add is I've always loved building high performance teams and driving that culture of creativity and innovation. My teams have won over 100 creative and effectiveness awards over the years, which is tremendous. You know, we did that by growing the business of our clients and their brands and their reputations, and therefore doing that for ourselves as well. And I think creativity and innovation is a great way to keep people happy and positive and optimistic, and finding solutions is a great thing. So it's also good for happy employees, I would say.
Keeping them stimulated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last question. You'll be glad to know.
Okay.
So, what have you planned? What would be your goals you'd like to achieve in the next 10 years?
Goodness. You know, I have this plate, this silver plate that a very close friend of mine gave me when I got married many, many years ago. And it says on it, love, health, wealth, and time to enjoy it. I still have it. I look at it, you know, more or less daily. And so I think, you know, I'd like to live that motto in the next 10 years. I have a bit more time than I did when I was flying around the world and you know, big global roles. So I have a bit more time to enjoy that. So I want to live that motto in the next 10 years. I want to, I'm working now with a couple of interesting companies. I want those companies to be runaway successes so that I can be rich and famous. I want my two sons to find the love that my husband and I found and have kids of their own so we can run after them and be active and healthy and occupied. And I want to, you know, add value to interesting things with people that I like. So that's more or less the 10-year plan, if there could be such a plan.
Well, I really wish you the very best with it. And Alina Kessel, it's been a great privilege to have you with us today. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Harry. Really enjoyed it. Thanks very much.